Check Complete, a referee podcast, is an educational resource for referees by referees, designed to connect and develop soccer officials of all ages and skill levels to better serve the game both on and off the field. We're excited to be here today, Brendan and I, alongside Jeff Swartzel, a pro assistant referee out of Indianapolis. And we're super excited, Jeff, that you've taken time to be with us today. It really means a lot, and we're excited to hear your story. And we've got some questions that we're going to lob your way. So to start, to just kind of get a background about who you are and allow you to maybe brag about yourself a little bit in your journey too, which is totally okay. You know, where are you from? I've already kind of shown my hand there, but how long have you been officiating? What do you do outside of refereeing? And then give us a little glimpse. We talked about that off air of just your pathway. We really enjoy hearing, no matter where referees are in their journey, how they've gotten to where they are today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first, thanks so much for having me on. I love the opportunity to talk about soccer any chance I get. So thank you for that opportunity. As you said, I'm Jeff Swartzel. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana right now, and I've been a soccer official since 2011. I got into the game because I had been a player my whole life. I was passionate about it. I loved playing. My father had played professionally, and when it came time to go to college, it turned out that I was a better runner than soccer player. And I decided to pursue track and field at the University of Akron. And when my running days were over, I wanted to get back in the game. And I found that either adult leagues were way too competitive for a guy that went to work on Monday, or not nearly competitive enough. And, my dad, who had been an official, really encouraged me to go get a referee license and try it from that side of the whistle. So that was in 2011. I worked kind of locally in Northeast Ohio for a few years. And my wife and I decided to move here to Indianapolis in 2014. And from there, I just worked through our system here and got my first professional game in 2016, an NASL game. And then just a few years later in 2020, my first MLS game. So it was about 10 years between first whistle to first MLS game.
Wow. That's awesome. That's great. So outside of refereeing, what does life look like for you?
Yeah, I work in IT. I work for a pharmaceutical company here in Indianapolis, Eli Lilly. I support their quality management on all of their product releases and medicines that they create. And my department is responsible for making sure that they're safe and healthy for everybody to use. So the great thing about that is that most of the work I do, I can do from home or kind of more commonly from a hotel when I'm on the road for a game somewhere. So there are a lot of times that I fly out after work. I'll work a day at a hotel and then do a game that night and then fly home early next morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
That's key. I know we have a lot of officials that when they're leaving college and beginning into the workforce as young professionals, they want to continue the referee career. And that's always something that they struggle with, is finding work that is accommodating for their referee passions. I know we run into that where we'll have college soccer players come back and referee, and they're like, my job won't let me get out till 5. I can't get to the JV start time at 3:30 or whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We face the same issue here. All of our local high school games are assigned as a JV and varsity set. And, we do find that those working professionals sometimes have a hard time getting out on for those JV games. And, my recommendation for everybody is that whether you're a high school official or college or just a youth official, there's a place for us all out there. And if you love the game, you want to give back to it, you can find a way from the officiating side. So, there's weekends, there's certainly late nights, and there's all sorts of opportunities to stay in touch with it.
We might need to soundbite that for a recruiting plug, because that is fantastic. I think sometimes folks see it maybe just from one vantage point and think that they have to fit a specific mold, but there is, like you said, a lot of avenues to get involved as an official in different aspects of the game, and we'll find a place for you if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah. Well, everybody has a different motivation. There's guys out there that are trying to make a few bucks. There are guys out there trying to make it to the MLS. There's guys out there trying to stay in shape and be fit. Maybe parents that want to know more about the laws of the game. And we have a place for all of you. It's all welcome. Please go to your local clinics, get a license and give back. We would love to have you.
That's right. That's great, Jeff. Thank you. Well, we're going to we've got a little bit of your background there. We appreciate you sharing all that you've done, and we've heard some questions, received some questions from our audience and listeners, and so Brendan is going to start us off with a couple of those.
Yeah, Jeff. So Drew Klemp from Lansing, Kansas has asked us, who was the most influential person to your referee career and why?
Yeah, great question, Drew. I could name a lot of people that helped me along the way, mentors, administrators, assigners, people at US Soccer, people at Indiana Soccer, and everywhere else in between. And what I find is that when you do that, you inevitably leave out a few people that were important. Mm-hmm. But the two people that were most important to me were actually pretty close. My wife, who has a demanding job of her own. We have a little girl here at the house. My trips often force her into being a single mother. And without her support, none of this works. Her ability to manage our house and our lives when I'm gone is just something that doesn't usually get the headlines, when a big call is made. And the other person is my dad. I mentioned him earlier. He was a professional player. He was a referee in North Carolina when I was a kid, and I spent a lot of weekends out at the fields with him, and he would ref and I would watch, or I would be the ball boy. And when I started officiating, we would talk after every game. We would talk through situations and scenarios and calls, and he would come see me ref sometimes. And, he was the first real sounding board I had to get honest, good feedback, when everything you're hearing is negative from a sideline. So, without those two people, I'm not here today for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. It is very important to have a good support system at home, and it's not talked about nearly enough in our career. Gordy?
Yeah, well, and the follow-up question to that would be, and I think you've already answered this, but Carson has asked about those that have inspired you to become a referee. So is that the same thing, or is there more that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, there's certainly there are certainly inspirations, both my wife and my father. When I was a kid, 1998 was like the first World Cup that I remember watching, from start to finish. I was a freshman in high school, and like every American soccer player at the time, I was a fan of Brazil and Ronaldo and Roberto Carlos. So I was following the team closely. And little did I know, but an American official was in the middle of a controversial game with them called at the time, what everybody thought was a phantom penalty kick. And, the next day, the images came out that he was 1,000% right. And it was the first time I really felt this human element. That referee is S. Ibrahimist, for those that don't know the story. And the story will come full circle for me. He handed me my first national badge back in 2016. So I always found his story inspirational, his, courage to make the right call in the big moment, his conviction to stick with it, were the attributes of what you needed to be good at this job.
We've always thought that this podcast could make people laugh and cry, and that could be a moment. That full circle is a tearjerker moment. That's really, really, I'm sure that was an emotional thing for you to kind of go from watching this person to I'm here, and he's handing me a badge. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. I'm lucky for so many reasons, but if I used to watch Mark Geiger on TV, and I watched Howard Webb, and I watched Jair Marufo, and now these guys are, on my speed dial in my phone. And it's just incredible to think, how far you can come in just a short time to, really make your way in this business.
That's awesome, Jeff. Thank you. So Carson F. from Overland Park has weighed in a couple other questions here, which I think are great. These are kind of fun. I like these. What's the craziest game that you've done?
Wow. When I was coming up, one of the opportunities a guy like me would get to try your hand at an MLS game is in the Open Cup competition. And, that's a competition that starts with your kind of local clubs, and it escalates all the way to MLS clubs. And you, as your local, Kansas League, might end up going all the way and playing an MLS team for the title. I was lucky in 2019, I refereed the semifinal. It was between Minnesota and Portland, and it was in Minnesota. It was the first time I'd been in front of that kind of crowd. And I had a really, really close offside decision that went against the home team that they very passionately disagreed with. And For all of my fellow ARs out there, you will never be 100% certain when it's that fast and it's that close. And I was sure that I'd missed it. And the fans were going crazy. The coach was going crazy. And I thought, I can't even leave the locker room. I have to stay back because I'm not wanted here anymore. And I was lucky to get a text at halftime that showed me the still shot, that it was the correct decision, renewed my confidence. But after walking back out of the tunnel and looking at the crowd right behind my goal, I thought maybe I won't check the goal in the second half and I'll go over to the touchline. So that was certainly the craziest kind of moment that I'd been in, at least up to that time.
Yeah, that's great. So Carson also wants to know, who is the coolest player that you've ever refereed?
Yeah, I'll have to temper my answer. There are a lot of cool players in the MLS right now. I'll actually say around that same time, I got to officiate a Liverpool match. Back then, before COVID, the EPL teams and some of the German teams would come to the US and play exhibitions in their preseason. And I had grown up a Liverpool fan. I was a huge Jurgen Klopp fan, and just the whole team was awesome. And after the game, it's just a friendly and it's fun and everybody enjoyed themselves. Jurgen came to the locker room after and gave everybody a signed jersey, everybody on the team. All 4 officials got one, and I've got mine framed. It's in my office now. And that was cool because these are guys that we only get to see on TV. We don't get to interact with them here as much. So I'll say Liverpool was the coolest experience I'd had, with Jurgen and his team.
I figured that would be a loaded question that you probably couldn't answer, being that you are still very much in the middle of your career there. And speaking of loaded questions, we did get another question from the spouse of someone you know well, who has asked, who is your favorite referee to work with?
John Freeman is probably my favorite guy in the MLS. That's actually true. I do love all of our MLS officials. Each one of them has a unique personality. It's fun. I mentioned before, I looked up to Essie Brahamis as I was kind of coming through my career path. And I modeled a lot of what I did after him. And unfortunately, there's kind of fewer AR names out there that you would know. So I really had to kind of focus on the referee side of the whistle. So I'll say Essie for now. I love what he did. Like I said, I loved his courage and his conviction and willing to take the difficult role of calling a penalty against, the fan favorite. So that'll still I'll stick with.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's before we move on to the next question there. It's interesting. We've had the discussion in different sports, about whether you'd like to work with one crew like football officials do. And this is going off script, Jeff, so I apologize. I said I wouldn't do this, but here I am. Whether football officials get to work with their crew week in and week out, and the same guys, who you're going into battle with, every game. And soccer and the other sport that I do, basketball, we've talked about that. Would there be benefit to working with the same crew, or is there? And so I guess I pose this as a question to you, kind of on the spot. But is there benefit to being able to work with the same crew every week, or is it a refreshing opportunity to kind of gain different perspectives and rotate around, work with different officials?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. There is something very comfortable about going into a game, especially a big game, with somebody who kind of fits your pattern. I call the game a certain way, and I work best with officials who call the game the same way I do. And there's something very comforting knowing what will a foul be today, what's a yellow card, and what's a red card. But at the same time, we grow when we're uncomfortable. And so working with new officials and learning their tendencies, just brings you a different perspective of how they manage the game and how they place importance on different things. So it's a little both. I do love some of the consistent crews I get to see, but at the same time, I love a new opportunity to meet a new face.
That's a great answer, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So on a little bit of a more serious note here. So Ricardo has asked, did you ever hit a wall when you were climbing the ladder? And if so, how did you overcome those obstacles?
Yeah. Great question, Ricardo. Being an AR is nothing but a wall. 90% of your games, nothing happens for you. And You can go a long time and throughout the season where you don't have big decisions, you don't have big games. And what I would say is that, you make what you want out of your own opportunities. I certainly had plenty of games where I didn't feel like people were watching. I didn't feel like I was making a difference. And it's a chance for you to really reflect on how can you give back? How can you, make more out of what you're getting? Maybe it's talking to the assessor longer and asking other questions, or maybe it's, making more connections with the referees and assistants on your crew, and building their trust. Maybe it's a chance for you to show off your work rate and your fitness. But I'm a firm believer that every single assignment you get, no matter what the level is an opportunity for you to work on your craft and do things the right way, so that, when you have that big moment in Minnesota and the place is going crazy, it's just muscle memory for you. You're just doing what you've practiced a million times before. And if people are watching, that's great. And if people aren't, then they will the next time. So, the wall is difficult. The road is long. And all I can say is you have to keep doing things the right way every time, because eventually it will matter. And you want to have done it the right way that time too.
That's great. That's great. My mind goes 1,000 directions with that, because there's such good tidbits in what you said there. I'll let it go, because as I'm going to say here towards the end, this is not the last time that we will see Jeff. Jeff's going to be a part of what we're doing here as we move forward, to provide continuing opportunities for education for our viewers and listeners. So the last question that I will ask, and as you and I exchanged messages, it's appropriate that I ask this question regarding VAR, since it is the Check Complete podcast. So my question, especially, as we watch games, we see, I think VAR impacts assistant referees quite a bit in just having to delay the flag. I mean, I think about what that would be like for me to go, my whole life I've been trained to, I see active involvement, I've got all three pieces to my puzzle, and boom, I put my flag up. And then now you guys are being told, no, wait, and wait, and wait, and wait. And then, so my question is, going from doing games where you weren't using VAR and not having that opportunity to be part of your crew that day, to now going to, doing those games regularly, what was that transition like? Talk to us a little bit. Let's get inside your head a little bit with what that's like.
Yeah, sure. Well, first I'll say that on the surface, it's not a lot different if you're taking care of business. VAR starts with the on-field decision. So if you can get your calls correct and, you're accurate, then you might go a long time without ever talking to the VAR. And that's really what we aim for. The on-field decision is what's first. And if it's correct, then we don't even need those guys. But you brought up the big difference in games, is the delayed flag. And there is a whole, series of decisions that go into whether to delay or not. Is it a goal scoring opportunity? How likely is it that you're wrong? Is it a close decision? Is it a far decision? Is he moving towards the goal, away from goal? And all of those things have to go through your mind in just a fraction of a second to know, do I flag this immediately or do I let this play? For me, I was lucky that the VAR program had been installed now for a few years by the time I got my first on-field assignment. And it gave me a chance to go through those mental repetitions for years of what would I say and what would I do and how would I look and how would I act, so that when my moment came, I had been through it as many times in my head as I could. I did have a delayed flag in my first game, and the part of the game that probably scared me the most was that, and it was as natural as you could be. And I think a lot of it is just that mental preparation of watching the clips and going through the thought process and, learning from the guys who had done it for years and years before I even got there. So, but that's also just a small component of what those guys can help us with. The thing I had to learn was how to quickly communicate with those guys when I had seen something. And, I'll give an example. We had some off the ball contact in a match that I was doing, and the player was holding his face, and I had very clearly seen him get hit in the chest. And so the two pieces were not adding up. And I was able to quickly communicate to the VAR that we had contact in the chest and that we did not have any, hands to the face. And when the VAR is able to clear that quickly, now we have this extra tool at our management to tell players that may be upset or that didn't see what happened, or, think that their player has been wronged. We can quickly tell them what actually did happen and, whether the player is rightfully hurt or not. So, recognizing those moments where, getting and giving information might be beneficial was a big learning curve for me.
Wow, absolutely. That's fascinating. Well, that wraps up the questions that we've received. This has been wonderful, Jeff. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that, like, you're not going to be able to sleep tonight unless you say this out loud on the Check Complete podcast? We want to give you space for that.
Yeah, sure. No, I think we've covered the high points. I would just say, the most common question I do get asked is, what does it take to be a professional official in the U.S.? And when I was coming up, James Conley was the AR coach for Pro 2, and he was just a tremendous educator and teacher and friend to me. And he used to talk about all of these different attributes. And you had to be correct and accurate, and you had to be confident, and you had to be professional, and you had to be all these things. And he was right. You can't get to the MLS without being accurate. You can't get there without being professional. But the last thing he always would tell me, he said that the best officials were those that cared about the game, the players that played it, and had just an undying passion for learning and growing in every moment of every game until it matters. So I took that advice, and I think about that every day of just, what could I do better? What can I do more? How can I be more fit? How can I be more knowledgeable? How can I be more accurate? And I think that passion for excellence is really what separates the people that make it and the people that don't. Because there are a lot of people out there that are accurate as me, and they're not making it maybe because of one of those other little pieces.
Absolutely. That's great. Brendan, do you have any wise words for us before we end our interview with Jeff?
I don't know if I can top anything that Jeff has said, so I'm gonna leave it at what's already been said.
Very good. Well, we do really appreciate it, Jeff. And like I said, we're not saying goodbye. We're going to say see you soon, because we're going to see other ways we can incorporate you into what we're doing here and your expertise and everything. And then, of course, if you're in Kansas City, we'll barbecue on us. So let us know.
For sure. I can't wait.
Very good. Well, thanks, Jeff. We'll say goodbye, but we'll talk to you again soon. So
great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.